Eric, my friend.
Yes.
Have you heard the phrase, you have to play the hand you're dealt?
Is that a card game reference?
I've heard of card games. I can't remember where from, but yes.
Yes, I have heard that. And beyond being in card games.
You mean like that phrase from a card game might actually apply to life itself?
Oh, wow. You're getting really deep now. You're sort of
I am so deep.
You know, you're sort of blending our art and our life together.
Just don't ask me what Monster Reborn does. But so
you've just opened up the floodgates of fan mail, right?
Yeah. There we go. There's the comments. Go wild. On the YouTube, you can see the tracking where people are paying attention and they spike. And when it spikes, sometimes it's like people going back and re-listening. That might get a spike. Yeah. But anyway, so equating the game of life to other games is nothing new. So we shouldn't be surprised that phrase comes along. It's an ancient phrase. So we all have the experience of having a hand to play, being in a situation or a circumstance. And I remember when my mom was telling me for the first time about her younger sister being diagnosed with cancer that eventually took her life. And this was when my aunt was in her 60s. So I remember that phrase being used, and it was, well, you deal with you play the hands you're dealt, or the hand you're dealt, or whatever the exact phrase is. And it's just a way of encapsulating a very complex situation, because it does, in a sense, simplify it down to its basic elements that you can deal with.
Yes.
Right? There's all of these things, but very often when you're in an overwhelming situation, really useful thing is to have a simplified way of looking at it, so you can actually know what to do and take action.
Sure.
Yeah. So in our log line for the Heart of the Cards, we've talked about creativity, we've talked about inspiration, and now we come to the phrase dealing with what we're dealt. And when we make live appearances, we often characterize that as it means both the good and the bad, even though I think most people assume it's only the bad part.
Yeah.
But not only are negative circumstances challenging, but really good ones can present their own challenge as well.
Yeah, and you could be dealt good cards.
Absolutely. Play the hand you're dealt. Yeah. And if you fail to play those good cards you've been dealt well, that's a loss.
I agree.
Of a certain kind. So that is what we're going to discuss and explore and share with our audience today.
Ooh, sounds interesting.
So shall I deal you in?
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt.
Hey, this is Dan Green.
And Eric Stewart.
And this is episode 33, part 1 of the Heart of the Cards, dealing with what we're dealt.
I like it.
Yeah. So, of course, in Duel Monsters, there's lots of different ways those cards can combine, and maybe someday I'll learn how to play.
Yeah, don't ask me.
Although I've heard recently from duelists at the tournaments and like the nationals, I was recently asked to be a part of that, which was so much fun. And I love meeting the actual duelists. They amaze me with what they're able to do. But they were telling me, like, the newest version is just so complex. And if it's hard for them, I'm like, I don't stand a chance.
Yeah, and then we've talked about this. I mean, going from directing the show, playing Kaiba, whatever. I know it's disappointing, but I tell the fans my go-to line is, I don't know how to play, but I can still beat you. And I don't mean you, because you always beat me. I mean you, the fan.
Well, only because I have good writers.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I've seen you use that. The fans love it when you diss them. There must be some sort of sadomasochistic thread in the Kaiba fans.
Yeah, I'm just acting.
Tell me I'm awful. Yeah. So I'll kick off with a story that I have mentioned before on the podcast, but I haven't gotten into the detail that I will today. And this will represent when you feel that you're in a very negative situation.
Okay.
And I'm going to talk about the time when I went into a mental institution.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was 15. And I had for those of you who haven't heard the previous episodes or may not know, I had recently moved from Indiana to New Jersey, and my mom had got a position at Rutgers, and so part of what that move entailed was not just relocating, but I, up to that point, was in a lovely house, and I had my family, which was my mom and my older sisters, and that also happened to be the same year that the sister who was closest in age to me was going off to college. So even if we hadn't moved, it would have been Mom and I in Indiana under different circumstances, but I still would have had the context of all my friends and that sort of a thing, and the house that I grew up in. But the house was stripped away. My sense of having siblings was stripped away, and I had already been slipping into a form of depression, but I was not really aware of it. I mean, it had been happening probably since I was 10 or so, and that move concentrated, exacerbated all of these things that were happening with me internally, and also took away some supports that would have been there otherwise. Some supportive friends. So, I mean, yes, we could call, we could write letters. There wasn't the internet. We couldn't Skype or Zoom. But even though those friends from Indiana were there for me in a sense, it's not the same thing. And also, my mother was dealing with being in a new job, a more demanding position, and she had less to give me too. So I start isolating. One of the things that I was doing was skipping school and not doing my homework. I made school my battleground as opposed to picking fights or getting lost in drugs and stuff like that. And I was creating this critical mass, and I had asked my mom if we could find somebody for me to talk to, some form of therapist. And I started seeing this woman. But it was not keeping pace with my sense of crisis that I was feeling internally and manifesting externally with the school stuff. And my mom was away for a weekend, which wasn't unusual, and it was for work. She wasn't, lollygagging or being irresponsible. She was in Mexico having the drinks with the umbrellas. Not at all. No, my mom was very, very responsible. And so over the course of this weekend, I had convinced myself that I had blown off my homework so thoroughly that there was this critical assignment in one of my classes that was due, and there was no way that I was going to be able to get it done. And I blew off the appointment I had with the mental health care worker I was seeing. I'm forgetting if she was a social worker or what exactly her title was, but definitely a mental health professional. And so she was alarmed, and she came by the apartment and was knocking on the doors, and I really gave it her all to try to get me to come to the door. And I was just hiding in my bedroom, and I knew that if I just waited long enough, eventually she would go away. Mm-hmm. And then there must have been some sort of phone exchange or something, but I did eventually go to an appointment to see her. And this is, again, before my mom gets back from out of town. And she informs me that she's set up for me a place at this mental health facility where it's essentially a place where teens go who have attempted suicide, which I hadn't attempted at that point. I had thought about it, but I hadn't actually tried to do it. So, and also for those of you who are listening, those suicidal, self-destructive thoughts are among the things that therapy is the most effective at treating. Mental health professionals will tell you there are other things that therapy is less effective at, but usually those thoughts of self-destruction are temporary, meaning they don't last for years and years. They might last for, several weeks or a month. And that's one element that's treatable. But another element is very often the causes for that are things that a therapist can successfully help the person who needs the help work their way through, see the other side, understand that that's not a solution, and so forth. I don't want to get too far into it because I'm not a professional. We should really have somebody on here speaking to that.
Yeah.
Which we've talked about. But anyway, so for anybody out there struggling with that, understand it doesn't have to be the worst case scenario, and there is help out there. And as Eric and I have said from time to time, you are really the only one who can save yourself. That's true, but you never do it alone. Nobody ever does it alone. Okay, so there's that. So I'm being presented in this session with this, what I am perceiving as basically, I had a choice, but I realized I put myself in such a position that there was no choice. And also, I didn't feel like saying no to that would be better for me. So even though it was a scary idea, I conceded that it was probably the best thing for me to do. I was so afraid of how angry my mother would be. This is not like going for a joyride in the car and, getting it dented.
Right.
So, and how much I was scaring my mom, which wasn't my intention. It's just what was going on with me. So actually, when my mom did come to the facility when I was being admitted, my mother gave me no negativity at all. And I was really relieved by that. So this was a period of my life that lasted about 7 to 8 weeks, which is a standard cycle for that adolescent mental health unit. And it's a unit in the sense that it's locked off. You can't leave. There are restrictions so that you can't hurt yourself, no sharp objects and things like that.
Right.
There's a structure and a protocol, and there's maybe 10 other or so people in similar age and also in similar distress. Although there was one young woman who was dealing with a very different kind of mental health issue where she was at times delusional, like she was really talking to people who weren't there or not hearing what you were saying. And anyway, but most of them were more similar to me, where they were teenagers who could appear to be normal, on the outside, right, making jokes and that sort of a thing, but definitely had deep underlying issues. One of the kids I shared a room with, his plan was to fake out the therapist so that he could get discharged and then commit suicide. And yeah, right. And we have these, at least a couple of group talks dealing with our problems, meaning, we're sharing with each other what's going on. And then we had private counseling stuff as well. And I remember I outed that guy in one of the group meetings, and he was so mad at me for like 2 days.
Right.
But then he realized I was just trying to help him. So in this experience, I'm going from feeling like I am clinically crazy, and in desperate need of this help, which was true. I was really in severe need of these things, and I wasn't really sure what to expect. And these conversations about what's going on with you, I was so good at denying where I was from, dissociating from my pain. When it was my turn to share with my peers what was going on with me, I could talk about it, but as one very astute young woman, again, a peer, reflected back, she said, "It's like you're talking about someone else." And she was absolutely right. And the head of the mental health thing, he and I had a one-on-one very early on, and he basically said the same thing. He said, I don't think you're going to progress at all here. I think you're so closed off that you're kind of untouchable. Those weren't his exact words, but that was the sense of it. And I was like, okay, great. Does that mean I'm so crazy I can't be helped? I didn't know what to make of that. Anyway, so the weeks progress, and with that, I make progress in the sense that I allow myself to become more vulnerable. I crack through my defensive armor. I crack through defensive, not meaning like shut up, no, I'm not, you are. That wasn't no, but but like dissociating and essentially just lying, to myself so that I can lie to others effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean lying about normal things, but like the deep stuff inside that's really getting at you. So, and I learned a lot about what it was to be emotionally authentic and truthful and just connected internally. And when I was reaching the end of my time there are different things, different kinds of rewards you get for the work that you're doing there. And part of that includes different degrees of status that you're allowed certain freedoms, certain privileges. And by the end of my time there, I had reached the full status level I could possibly reach, which was I was allowed to leave. I was allowed to be away from the unit and come back. So there was a tremendous amount of trust that was given back to me. But it was another thing that was reflected by one of the professionals that was there is they were comparing, when you first got here, you seemed like you had it all together, that, you could talk about whatever and anything. And you spoke with a sense of, clarity and command and what have you. And as these meetings progressed throughout those weeks, it's nice to see you let that go, and you seem much more open and vulnerable, and you don't have the quippy thing to say, or you don't have the sort of boilerplate response that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of other stuff I could get into about that chapter of 7 or 8 weeks, but the thing I want to impress on people listening was it is kind of like a crucible. A crucible is something that, it burns away what you don't need. And in a sense, it got rid of a facade. It got rid of a mechanism, a survival mechanism, but that survival mechanism was keeping me away from dealing with what I really needed to deal with. That survival mechanism developed because it was too much for me to deal with, right?
Right.
What was going on inside. But I came to an environment that could support me, so I could let that go.
Well, they helped you find that for yourself.
Yes, they did. Now, if this were a cheesy movie, the story would end with I got discharged and everything was fine after that. That's not true. That's not what happened. And I actually had to repeat a year of high school because I was still resisting.
Mm-hmm.
But I was still much better off than I would have been otherwise. And I also had developed a positive relationship to the idea of getting help and having help.
Right.
And that is something that I will always value. And just another story of you're dealt a hand that you don't know, how to deal with it. And even though it may seem like the most impossible challenge to confront, you can get through it. And getting through it doesn't mean you feel like a winner immediately. But it does get you to a place where you can continue to move forward.
Yeah, and I have to say, thank you for sharing,
Sure.
such an intimate story, and a vulnerable story. I mean, the irony is there too. But
for you listeners, we had to stop a couple times because I was getting choked up, but
but
we edited those out.
but the fact is that we don't have this sort of like textbook that tells us how to do anything. So
No.
When we're presented with challenges, we don't necessarily feel like anyone else has even dealt with the same stuff or similar things, similar emotions,
sure, yeah.
or and
or we're ashamed. We want to hide
mm-hmm, yeah,
because Yeah, it's so abnormal.
Yeah, whether it's exactly that, or angry, or why is this happening to me? All of these things, and how you respond to it. Whether you lock yourself in a room or you go and fight everybody that you meet, whatever it is. But also just
Eric.
but also just getting that sort of like, oh, this is why I am doing this, or I'm not the only one who's ever dealt with this before. So
the primary therapist who was assigned to me said very often in our private sessions, "Welcome to the human race."
Yeah, it's perfect. That's exactly what I was getting at. Is that my goodness, we the fact that we do sort of navigate through life sometimes as well as we do is pretty much a miracle. I mean, good, bad, and whatever. It's like, my goodness, it isn't easy. It is also it is a blessing to be part of this, the madness sometimes, but it's not like that your next door neighbor, grass is always greener. He gets up in the morning and has a fantastic wake up, and everything is fantastic. There's no traffic, and I do my job, and it's productive, and I come home and everyone is happy, and all the bills are automatically paid. Right. So, well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, and there's so much more I could have gone into, but I just wanted to extract the one thing I think that would be digestible
Definitely
in this conversation. So what about you, my friend? Do you want to take the flip side of that card?
Yeah, I'm going
talk about a positive. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I definitely. So, got to figure out the best way to say this so that it doesn't sound like some sort of like humble brag, but a lot of times in life, like sometimes when things are really good, when you're doing really well, or you're whether you're financially comfortable, whatever it is, it's a great thing on one level, but it can also be a sort of like you almost have blinders on and not paying attention to the rest of what's going on.
Sure.
But also how you handle that. I think of the time when there was definitely a chunk of about maybe 10 or 15 years where I was really just in the mix of, whether it was working on these shows, directing them, running around New York City, booking commercials, and just like all of the things. It's like this moment in life where it's like, and then the music stuff was going on at the same time, and it was like all of these things were sort of clicking, and that seemed to sort of put the blinders on that the rest of my life was all was great, because all of this stuff career-wise and financially was in a good spot. And I look at that time in my life and I think, my goodness, I was so much on like overdrive with everything that I was doing. I was definitely reaping the benefits of busting my butt the way I was, but I didn't even have time to enjoy it. It wasn't like, oh, now I'm working so hard, or I'm doing really well, I should take a vacation, I should take a break. No. It was this sort of like, it needs to be plus this and plus that and plus this. And, okay, I reached that level. Now I got to get up to the next level. And I didn't even realize, and I am maintaining this positive spin on this without going into the sort of what was negative about that. But I didn't even realize what was going on while I was in it. I was doing things like, oh, great, residual check came in. Yeah, all right. I'm not spending it on anything. I'm just like, yeah, this is good. Oh, yeah. Like, I didn't know who I was proving it to. It was nice to be able to take care of the family and not stress over, bills and whatever at that time. I mean, I've been on the other side of that too, not too long after that. But I don't know what, like, if I could do that again, if I could help that Eric in that time with the knowledge of this Eric now, I probably would have slowed down and just figured out a sort of more of a balance, because my entire day-to-day was how much stuff can I get done so that I could earn more, do more, book more. I don't even think it was about the fame. I don't think it was that was not a motivating thing. I just loved to be working. Like I
Wait a minute. Were you born in America?
But see, I never had the pressure of even that. Like, I was never told, you've got to go out there and get a job, son, and do this stuff. Because I always was...
You mean you were told that by your parents?
Yeah, but even just, like, I didn't hear that from the world. I looked at, I want to do what I want to do, and I'm going to be the best at doing it. And I'm going to, and I'm going to make money doing it, not because I was driven by money. I just was like, well, I got to pay bills. I got to feed myself and my family or whatever it is. I'm going to do these things, or I'm going to work on projects where, it's kind of cool to be known as this, or maybe recognized as that, in with my peers, maybe. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the motivation was. And we're not talking about the music side as much. The music side, I had a little bit more of my sort of like what I was chasing after, or what I was trying to fulfill with my...
I understand what you mean.
But this was like nonstop working, never saying no to opportunities, because I didn't want to miss that chance to do something different or new or whatever, and keep working my way up. And I don't know if I handled that in the best way. I don't think I could tell you I enjoyed it 100%, even though I thought I did. And I also don't think, like, I don't know whether I was thinking, well, I'm building this nest egg, or I'm creating this, this retirement fund. I didn't think that way. I just thought, like, oh, look, I got a text that they need me for this thing. Oh, I got an email over here. Oh, I got a phone call from that. They wanted me to do this. Yeah, I can do all that. I can push myself to all these limits because I'm Eric. I can handle anything. And I want to be known as, like, oh man, he's the best at, and he's really good at this, and wow, he's the guy. Like, I remember the best compliment I got at that time in my life was my agent, my voiceover agent at the time, said, "You're a Renaissance man, Eric. That's what you are." And I was like, yeah, because I want to do it all, creative and whatever, and be successful in all these things. And I don't, dealing with what I was dealt, the opportunity to do fun and successful things, I don't know if I really, like, took the time to sit back and appreciate it as much as I could have, and also enjoyed what I was doing. Like, fans will ask me, what's your favorite story arc of Pokemon? And I'll say, I don't remember taking a break in the 10 years I worked on the different series, the different seasons. So, I mean, a couple of weeks off, and then we pick up again.
So the arc is not clear because it's all...
I'm like, it's one big blur. It's one big long journey. Yeah. Ash was taking us around the world, and we were doing things. I really don't remember. Now, I should remember. Like, I should be able to have some sort of, like, landmarks in my journey to go, yeah, and I remember when that, it's like when someone says, oh, yeah, back in the 80s, and you think, oh, yeah, what, like 20 years ago? You forget. Like, I have no frame of reference when it comes to time. I could not tell you, the time frame of this stuff. I really have to stop and go, oh, my goodness, I was doing that for 20 years? I was doing that for how long? So anyway,
let me just get a little. You use the word framing. I think that's great. Yeah. So you don't know why you were driving yourself so hard.
Yes,
is partly what you're saying.
Yep.
And you were encountering what was essentially just a flood of opportunities to to work in various ways, within the voiceover industry, and a lot of that at 4Kids too. But 4Kids wouldn't have hired you if you hadn't taken over the studio.
Right.
And that would have happened if, I'm forgetting the woman who basically
Alice.
mentored you through the
Alice
right?
Whitfield, yep.
Yeah. So you were already making that trajectory, you were going upward before the 4Kids opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And then you become central characters in one of the most popular shows ever. and then you become a central character in another show that was also really popular, and you're getting commercial work, which at the time was much more of a big deal.
Yes,
the commercial industry is not what it used to be, and and you're in your 30s.
Yeah,
you're in. What? Maybe you're approaching 40 toward the end of that tale. Not quite.
Not even quite. No. It's really no.
Yeah. So from your 20s into your 30s.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of people think of as the prime of they're on the rise. They're making their mark.
Right.
That's not to say that there's nothing that happens after that, but that's certainly something that people of our generation traditionally think of as the time when you do that,
yes.
right? And you can then build up on that. But maybe some of that just basic cultural stuff was in part of your thinking. Maybe that had nothing to do with it. Maybe it was more, you have this drive to really be the best. If anybody ever plays a video game with Eric, I promise you probably don't play it as well as he does.
No, I get my butt
and when
kicked
you
all the
and
time
when you're doing
by gamers.
Yeah, and when you're doing one of those military op games, Eric's the lead, not to appease his ego, but because he really knows how to play the map better than anybody else.
Well, I appreciate the compliment, but that to sidetrack for a second, that's sort of like how teams fall into place, right?
Sure.
Just in whether it's business, whatever, personalities dictate sort of, what people's roles are in that situation. Just because someone is the head of a company doesn't mean that they necessarily are more in charge or have more responsibility than their right-hand person or their left-hand person or whatever it is. All the departments are important, right? Because it's the sum of all parts. But yes, we fall into those roles sometimes naturally. I just think that I knew that I couldn't stay in one situation for too long, even though I am known to be very stuck. I wear the same outfits. I have the same hats. I do. I'm very much like you would know what clothes were in my closet without having to open the door. You'd be like, I know exactly what it looks like in there, right? Because who I am. But that being said, I do that with some things in my life, but I'm also not complacent with other things in my life. I am always looking.
But you and your wife never have that conversation of, what am I wearing? Just kidding.
No, actually, Lindsay said to me the other day, you know what? I think I'm going to do what you do. I'm going to wear the same thing all the time. I mean, clean versions of it. I'm going to wear the same thing.
I was just going to clarify that. Yes.
All the time. She goes, because it just seems so much easier. You're just like ready to go in like 15 minutes.
Hey, worked for Einstein, right? Yeah.
Right? Well, and Steve Jobs.
Okay, right.
Yeah, he did the same thing. Like they
I did not know that, but he did have that.
Yeah, the black turtleneck
in the jeans. Yeah.
They said that I'm not going to take credit for the concept of the genius, but they say that that's something that they do. They wear the same stuff. But anyway, so just going to the moral of the story is really what I wanted to sum up with was, so sometimes we are given great opportunities and we follow through with them and we're really just, the mojo is working. Things are falling into place. Without being the, sort of cheesy with the cliche of stop and smell the roses, it's like, I think that what we also have to remember to do is when we are in the groove is to enjoy that journey too. You can still be working your way up to try to better yourself and get to the next level of whatever you're doing. And if it's going well, that's great. But savor that. Like, like enjoy it. And I don't mean you don't take it for granted. That's a different message. I'm saying, okay, you've got this going on. Like, just absorb it and enjoy it.
Right.
I think that that's something that sometimes we feel like, well, I just got to keep going. That's great if that's your drive, but you can't take it with you. So enjoy it while you have it, and it's okay to do that. It's okay to do that. Like, I love when someone shows me their art with confidence, not ego, but with confidence, and says, hey man, I did this for you. I did this. Wow, you did that? Yeah, I did that. I work in this and I do that. And they tell me about their craft in a way that's sort of like, yeah, I know that this is good in this realm. It's good. And I like that. I like that confidence. I like that they're putting that out there, that they're saying, I'm moving, I'm networking. I'm doing my thing because I enjoy the thing I'm making, and I also enjoy sharing it. I enjoyed all of the voiceover work primarily that I did. The characters are so much fun to play. I wish that there wasn't this sort of, it was a lot of work too, in terms of my reflection on it.
Well, let me bounce that back off of you. So part of what you did was rose to the occasion and actually managed that huge amount of work. And even if you were able to, as you say, not only not take it for granted, but really, relish it and savor it in the time that you have it. It's still a lot of really hard work. Like you couldn't have downshifted, without giving something up.
Right.
And I also we've talked about this before, but I've always thought one of your best moves was leaving all that and going to Nashville.
Yeah.
Which put so much else at risk, but you understood you weren't getting what you really needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that was something that was always, on my mind. And, I'm glad that I did that. And yeah, I'm also glad that I established myself doing the other stuff so that I had some sort of like,
I was just about to go there. So your ability to manage all that, to achieve all that, has also let you, go to these other steps, right? So you're not sustaining doing the same thing.
Right.
But without it, you couldn't be where you are.
Exactly.
So when you leave to go to Nashville, you're not leaving because there's nothing for you in New York.
Right.
There's too much for you.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
I mean, it sounds crazy to say that, and I don't want it to come across like, well, come on, man, like what that, you weren't just happy with that. You had, you're walking away from all this stuff because what, you're doing too well. It's like, no, I was doing well.
No.
Doing what I loved at that time, but then I realized the thing that I really wanted to be doing maybe wasn't driven by the money. It wasn't driven by driven by the fill every hour of my day with something, that I have to do. Yeah, it just reminds me of we had this conversation. You and I had this conversation just the other day. I won't name names, but a friend of mine sent me a little text about something about a convention, and I said I was doing something a little different that weekend, and he said, oh man, but it's so busy here. And I said, well, sometimes it's not about the money. He said, it's always about the money. And I said, and that's what makes you and I different. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not poo-pooing making a living, especially doing what we do. What we do to make a living is definitely something I am so grateful to be a part of.
Absolutely.
But
it's kind of magic.
But every once in a while, you got to say, okay, like, I just want to go have a picnic in a park or something.
Sure. And in your story, it's a very specific field of work, but this same story could apply to anybody in any field, a lawyer, or doctor, whatever.
Balance.
Balance. I've heard of that word before.
Yes.
I am so glad that I was able to get to know you during that time. And that's led to one or two moments that I've enjoyed.
Just a few.
Outside of the con. Just a handful. A couple. But the challenge of having such profound windfalls, if you think of it as you're a ship on the ocean, it's like the 1800s, you're, these huge sails. And and then you catch some wind. If you don't steer that ship right, you could mess yourself up.
That's true.
And you only have so much control over the circumstances. It's not like driving a car, and you want to take advantage of that wind because you don't know when it's going to come along again.
Right.
So,
Yep.
That's a lot to, as you said, balance. That's a lot to deal with, even when it's essentially a very good thing.
Exactly.
But doing the work wasn't just about making a good amount of money. It wasn't just about making a great reputation, but it was also a confirmation that you're really good at what you're doing, right? This people probably don't think that Eric Stewart needs much affirmation because him having a big
I'm acting.
It's a running joke. Of course he does. Everybody does.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and that's good for you too, right? So it was a windfall that hit a lot of really important categories.
Mm-hmm.
So better not screw it up.
Yeah, right. Which I have done.
Well, that's part of everyone's story too.
That's right.
But thanks for sharing all that.
Thank
that's
you.
Great. Yeah, it's important. I think it's helpful. I think to understand that you can't really simplify things purely in terms of black or white and good or bad, and like people who get married and end up having a wonderful marriage that lasts decades, and whatever the best version we have on earth of what a good marriage looks like. Mm-hmm. But I bet you on their wedding day they were a little frantic.
Just a little, yes.
Just a little. It's a good thing, but it can drive you crazy.
That's right.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you, Eric, and thank you to everyone who has been listening and following the Heart of the Cards. And we look forward to bringing some other people in on the show to have conversations about their journeys, voice talent that you might be familiar with, and also people from maybe some other different creative areas. And as we alluded to earlier, we also have been wanting to address some of the mental health issues that are cropping up. Some of them we've been living with as long as human beings have been around. Others are manifesting in certain ways because of the way that our culture is developing. And, there's this whole issue of isolation, even though we have social media, just as one example. So we have a lot of things that we're looking forward to discussing, and we are so grateful anytime you make time for us. And we look forward to the next time where we can have a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stewart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions,